This is a Fox News alert. Fox News chief Washington correspondent James Rosen has learned that Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl converted to Islam during his captivity with the Taliban and even considered himself a, quote, warrior for Islam, according to secret documents. Rosen will have much more on Special Report in the next hour, but let's discuss these shocking new developments right here on The Five. Eric, these documents show that he converted to Islam. He considered himself a mujahid. He also said that he was kept in a cage while he was part of this camp run by the Haqqani network. Does this significantly change the game because it confirms what his fellow soldiers have been saying that the White House has been trying to dispute for days? So
here's what came out today since the last time we were here. New York Times reported that Bergdahl on two separate occasions walked off from the base that he was at, one time in California, one time in Afghanistan, prior to the time that he allegedly walked off and was captured or whatever happened with the Taliban. As you point out, he converted to Islam. He declared himself a warrior for Islam while he was in captivity. Add that to the emails to the parents, add that to the journal he left behind, and what you end up with, the same facts, with one extra fact, that the Obama administration spiked the ball, did their victory dance in the end zone way too soon. Yeah, I understand they still want to get him back. He's an American. You want to get him back. But before you go ahead and parade the parents out and, you know, do your Rose Garden thing, you better make sure who the guy you're saving really is.
Dana, according to this report that James Rosen has filed, Bergdahl was the subject of a, quote, major classified file prepared by the U.S. intelligence community and that they had been monitoring for him for years. So it is, again, impossible to think that somehow the White House didn't know if our intelligence community was preparing this massive file that showed that he, in fact, had ties to this Haqqani group.
Right. So, again, not illegitimate questions. I think they're reasonable questions that Americans are asking to try to get answers from the administration. But a question about James Rosen's report, or that I would ask James, and maybe he knows more about this, is that what if he was made to convert by by the Haqqani network, by the Taliban? Maybe he was willing to be converted, but perhaps he was under duress. If it is true that he was kept for 5 days upon his recapture, after he escapes for a little while, gets captured, they put him in a metal cage for 5 days, that might explain the White House's and State Departments seemingly they had some confidence that there was something yet to come out that would make Americans feel more sympathetic towards him. I think this also raises yet another question, and I've been praising the Army for the care and feeding of the family of Bergdahl and for his rescue and the handoff. But I think that if this is true, was the intel community not communicating directly with the Defense Department and telling them that they had a problem within their ranks? We know that the platoon members were telling their higher-ups that they thought that there was a problem there. So why is Bergdahl not removed from the theater earlier and either given an honorable or a dishonorable discharge? I think that, too, is a reasonable question to ask.
And this also doesn't make a lot of sense, Greg. The State Department spokeswoman came out and said, well, we're still trying to figure out the facts. And then yesterday, she with certitude said, well, these aren't the facts, when a reporter asked about what his fellow soldiers were saying. Doesn't it seem more and more that this White House had the facts and that they were trying to suppress this story? I mean, there are reports that they were trying to suppress the Associated Press and Time magazine, or New York Times, I should say, from mentioning Bergdahl. Is it harder and harder to believe that they didn't know that this was a problem?
This is the consequence of political urgency. They wanted to get this thing done, and they didn't. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't read half this stuff. By the way, I don't see how converting to Islam is a bad thing. Not to do so would have been Islamophobic. Let's face it. You know, you have to be polite while you're there. The thing is, it could very easily be Stockholm Syndrome, where you become enamored by your captors. In Stockholm, it's called Cleveland Syndrome. It seems to be Stockholm Syndrome by proxy, because it seems like his dad has become sympathetic as well. This is a mess. You can't condemn this poor guy for what he's gone through, and you can't be sure if he was vulnerable or if he seeked this out. But it reveals, like what Eric says, how poorly rolled out this exchange was. It's like we gave 5 Mercedes for a Slinky. President Obama could have acknowledged all of this stuff, all this complexity, and said, despite the fact this guy could be a criminal, he could be bad, we need him because he has a wealth of information and he could be dangerous, he may be a risk, and he's not a hero, but we need him. That's all he had to say. By the way, this guy is still a sergeant.
Here's what I don't understand, Juan. If they knew that there were issues with Bergdahl, wouldn't it make more sense for the White House to say, as part of this prisoner swap, we need to get him back because we do believe he could be collaborating with them, giving them intelligence. He could be working. We got to get him back on our side and then court-martial him. Wouldn't that make a little bit more sense? Then the White House wouldn't have to go against the military. They could say, look, this was a national security threat. That's why we got him back, and not give us these just lame excuses about his health and all this other stuff, mixed facts that we've been hearing.
Well, first of all, I think everybody knew the background on Bergdahl. I mean, Rolling Stone had written about this several years ago. I think it had been out there. I don't think there's any secret about Bergdahl not being fully committed. And in fact, there was information about the fact that the platoon he was in, had tremendous discordant issues. People not getting along, poor quality leadership. There was a very unfortunate tweet out of the White House today saying that some of those guys were going after Bergdahl. I thought that was really wrong. Listen, they can say what they want to say, but the fact is people knew the issue. But I think, Andrea, the key answer to your point is it's separate from whether or not you go back as commander-in-chief and get someone of your own country, your military soldier, and get him back from the enemy.
But if that were true,
President Obama spoke today and said just that.
President Obama would not leave Sergeant Tamarisi in a prison in Mexico, and he wouldn't have left 4 men behind in Benghazi. They're not consistent when it comes to leaving men behind.
We're fighting a war. We're not fighting a war in Mexico.
But the president says we're not fighting a war against radical
I don't know. You may know more than I do, Greg. But let me just say one more thing.
Well, you can't cherry pick when you're going to leave men behind and when you're not.
It's a war. We're in a war. That man was sent there to fight an enemy, to risk his life and die. But let me just say one more thing. I think that the president said this so well today. He showed compassion to a family that sent their child overseas to fight a war for the United States, and he has not had the opportunity. When kids come back in wooden boxes, he writes a letter, but he doesn't have the opportunity to say to them, listen, we understand the sacrifice your family made. He did for this family.
Juan, allow me. So if you're right, and the administration and President Obama read the 2012 Rolling Stone article and realized that this guy may have been a bad guy, was it advisable for Susan Rice to go out on Sunday and say he served honorably and with distinction?
I don't know about with distinction, but it's clearly that's a judgment made by the military. Even the military, as Andrea said earlier, promoted him to sergeant.
But there's a reason for that.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry.
No, go. No,
it's just so in 2009 and in 2010, the Pentagon issued 2 separate reports saying that questioning whether or not he was honorable, and then he was absent, well, not AWOL. They didn't describe him as AWOL or a deserter because they hadn't talked to him, so they didn't know.
Right.
The reason he's promoted to sergeant is not because he had any particular distinction. It was just, it's time served. Mm-hmm. It's just, it's like a clock ticks over.
But
it's not
my point to you, Dana, is if there was, in fact, a sense that this man has behaved dishonorably, et cetera, you don't have to do anything. You could say, you know what? We honor the fact that he is being held as a prisoner, but we don't.
I just don't want to give the impression that he got a promotion from the Defense Department that was based on merits. It was based on time served.
Well, look, if they're putting me in a cage and they've got me for 5 years,
that's not why he was, because they didn't know that.
But I don't know that. But I'm just saying this is a horrible situation.
And I don't think the cage fact really matters, because if it's true, according to Time, that Obama had been negotiating to get him out for years, this prisoner release. Yeah. He wanted to get rid of these prisoners. Well, of course the Taliban's going to keep their golden ticket to getting their 5 guys back. Of course they're going to keep him in a cage, whether he's part of their Warrior of Islam club or not.
Well, in fact, what I saw in this morning's papers was that one of the fears the administration has was they were going to kill him because they felt that his value was decreasing to the Taliban at this point.
Hey, Juan, why did that come out today, 5 days later?
Because what they had was they have to go back to the Hill, and they've had that secret briefing that they showed the tape.
But don't you really think that we're kind of they're kind of making this up as they go along? Hey, you know what? Let's just say Taliban threatened to kill him if we leaked any of this information. They had 5 days to do that. This came down on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday now, almost 6 days to say we had to do this now because there was a threat that he was going to be killed.
And we have to go to the sound one. Hang on 1 second. The president doubling down today. He's not second-guessing his decision on Bergdahl. Again, doubling down at a press conference today. Take a listen.
We had a prisoner of war whose health had deteriorated, and we were deeply concerned about it, and we saw an opportunity and we seized it, and I make no apologies for that.
Greg, no apologies for this decision.
Well, he's not going to apologize to us. He only apologizes to our enemies. We'll be right back. They said it was a health. They said it was a health issue, and the fact is, we can't tell internally if he has issues, if he's mentally ill. Physically, he looked better than me. If he could write a
that ain't saying much.
I know he could write a book, The Taliban's Guide to Six-Pack Abs. But no, we don't know. He could be in serious health, but it's serious health problems. But remember, John McCain was in serious. I mean, he was in bad shape, and he stayed there when he could have gotten out. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know what you could say. Is he in bad health? I don't know. I think what is President Obama going to say? That's what he's going to say.
So what did McCain say today?
Can I just do this?
McCain said today that the poor man was in isolation.
Yeah.
And John McCain, who was with other people, said, I won't even talk about the kind of psychological...
What else
That's
did
what I'm
John McCain say? He said that in the interview, I don't know if I have it with me, the exact words, but he said that, yes, he wanted Bergdahl to get back. He wanted him to be rescued, or he would have even been willing to do some sort of a swap, but that he didn't know any of the details. So that the details matter to members of Congress, and including Senator John McCain. So what then he said today is that if he would have known that it was these 5 Taliban that were going to be released, that he would have agreed with Clapper, Panetta, and all the other intelligence community that said, we absolutely do not have confidence that they would not return to the battlefield to kill more Americans.
Right.
For the full picture, I mean, it's more complex.
Yeah, and I don't think you can make a judgment on the guy's health from looking at that, because you don't know what's going on in his head and what's happened internally. He could have God knows what.
You know what you could do, though? You can change the dialogue. You can change the debate. It was health issues for 5 days. Yeah. We had to hurry up. His health was failing. We compared it to a video we saw 2 years ago, and it looks like his health was failing. That was the debate. That was the reason they said they had to go now, couldn't give Congress 30 days.
It was politically expedient.
But then we see the video, and we see a guy who walks on his own. He gets to the helicopter, climbs in the helicopter, and the debate among tables on TV says, well, he wasn't in such bad shape, but couldn't they have waited a few more days? And all of a sudden it becomes, I forgot to tell you, Taliban said if they don't release him, they're going to kill him.
Which is a different
Which is a health problem. You do die.
Yeah,
when somebody's going to kill you, it is a health problem.
Yeah.
But President Obama has wanted to release these 5 Gitmo detainees for years.
They're one of the hardest. They're some of the hardest ones to get rid of.
He's been trying to release them and close Gitmo Dana even before he was captured. Can I play this for you?
Sure.
Juan, I heard you mention these kids, using the term these kids. Bo Bergdahl's a kid. You may have gotten the memo from the White House, because Dana, the president, used very similar wording today at the press conference when he referred to Bergdahl as just kids.
I am responsible for those kids. And I get letters from parents who say, if you are in fact sending my child into war, make sure that that child is being taken care of. And I write too many letters to folks who, unfortunately, don't see their children again after fighting a war. This is somebody's child. And that we don't condition whether or not we make the effort to try to get them back.
Okay. I don't like to use the word kids either. I gave Bob Beckel a hard time about it the other day, because at the age of 18, there's at some point we have to get over this delayed adolescence in America. And at 18, if you decide to fight for your country or smoke weed in Colorado or whatever you get to do now, vote, those are actions that he was a man of conscience. He made decisions. I do think in some ways President Obama's team might say, well, we used to say bring our boys home. Okay, what's the difference between boys or kids? I think that we understand a distinction, but I also think that when I hear President Obama talking about Bergdahl as a kid and all of this compassion for the Bergdahl family, okay, I can understand that, but what I do not understand, and even though I'm sure he feels it, but they are not expressing it, it's the compassion for the families of the soldiers who served alongside Bergdahl, who then have to go on patrols, and they lose possibly up to 6, maybe even 14 members of that platoon in reconnaissance missions looking for Bergdahl. And there's some compassion that needs to be shown to those families as well.
I think there is compassion, Dana. Why don't you think not?
Has President Obama addressed them at all?
Of course. Listen. If you lost a child, and I'm going to say a child because you know what?
I know
one
it's
of my
always a
boys,
child.
No, I have children who are in their 20s and 30s, Dana. And if
Isn't that what I just said, Juan?
Well, I still
I'm not
consider them
talking
my
about
children.
your children. I'm saying that
I'm just
everybody is
saying.
going to say that. And I didn't criticize Obama for using the word kid. I do think, though, that when there are other people's children who fought alongside Bergdahl that then tried to save him and lost their lives or were wounded in that action, that they deserve some compassion as well.
I don't doubt that they would get compassion. And if the case of death, I know that they get compassion and they get a letter from the President of the United States.
Could I just throw this out there real quick? It looks like today, Greg, the White House is considering releasing another terrorist from Gitmo. Ted Cruz is trying to prevent this from happening.
Yeah. Closing Gitmo is part of Obama's legacy. Damn the outcomes. And he even admits there's a risk involved. So the question is, where do you put these fellas? And Harry Reid has been, strongly supportive of closing Gitmo. So I say, do it in his district. It could be like the Mustang Ranch. You get beheaded instead of bedded.
It's a very interesting idea.
My ideas are always interesting.
They are very.
Thank you, America.
I thought you were going to do the nuclear dump, but you went to the
We gotta
whorehouse.
go. Be sure to catch James Rosen on Special Report directly following the 5 with more on the new Bergdahl developments. Directly ahead, a White House official issues stunning remarks about Bergdahl's platoon members who have been critical of the circumstances about the night that he vanished. We have breaking details on that. And later, President Ronald Reagan remembered 10 years after his death. We will honor our nation's 40th president. That's coming up on the 5.